Captain Jax, Nova, Riley, a name whispered with reverence and a hint of trepidation across the galaxy. Wasn't he expecting to find anything but dust and echoes on the derelict freighter, Stardust Drifter? He stumbled upon it drifting aimlessly near the Xylos Nebula, a graveyard of forgotten ships and broken dreams. Jax, a man of few words and even fewer attachments, usually steered clear of such places. But something about the drifter's distress beacon, a faint, flickering pulse amidst the cosmic static, had snagged his attention. His ship, the Wanderlust, a battered but reliable vessel that had seen him through more close calls than he cared to remember, hung silently in the void as he initiated a boarding sequence. The drifter was a ghost ship. Its corridors were coated in a film of grime, the air thick with the metallic tang of decay. Emergency lights flickered erratically, casting long, dancing shadows that played tricks on the eye. Jax, his boots crunching on shards of broken equipment, moved cautiously, his pulse rifle held at the ready. He'd seen enough space hulks to know that danger lurked in the silence. Sometimes, it wasn't the vacuum of space that was the deadliest thing out there, but what remained behind. He found her in the ship's hydroponics bay, amidst the skeletal remains of what was once a thriving garden. She was curled up on the cold metal floor, her ragged clothes offering little protection against the chill. Her face was hidden behind a curtain of tangled, dark hair. Jax hesitated. He'd expected a corpse, maybe a stray space rat. He hadn't expected this. He approached slowly, the click of his boots echoing in the stillness. "Hello?" he called out, his voice rough from disuse. "Are you all right?" She flinched at the sound of his voice, her head snapping up. Her eyes, wide and luminous, met his. They were the color of storm clouds, swirling with a mixture of fear and defiance. For a moment, neither of them moved. Jax was struck by her beauty, even in her disheveled state. It was a raw, untamed beauty, the kind that spoke of hardship and resilience. "Who are you?" she asked, her voice hoarse and barely above a whisper. "Jax Riley," he replied, holstering his weapon. "I am here to help." She regarded him with suspicion, her eyes darting around as if searching for an escape route. "Help?" she repeated, a hint of skepticism in her voice. "Why would you help me?" Jax shrugged. "It's what I do," he said simply. He'd learned a long time ago that explanations were overrated. Sometimes, it was better to let actions speak for themselves. He offered her a hand. She hesitated for a moment, her eyes searching his. Then, slowly, she reached out and took it. Her hand was cold and calloused, but her grip was surprisingly strong. "My name is Lyra," she said. As Jax helped Lyra to her feet, he noticed a small, intricate tattoo on her wrist. It was a stylized image of a falcon in flight. He didn't recognize the symbol, but something about it seemed familiar. "Come on," he said, guiding her towards the Wanderlust. "Let's get you out of here." The Stardust Drifter was a tomb, a monument to a forgotten tragedy. As the Wanderlust pulled away, Jax couldn't shake the feeling that he'd stumbled upon something far more complicated than a simple rescue. He glanced back at Lyra, who was staring out at the receding ship, her expression unreadable. He had a feeling that his life was about to become a lot more interesting. And possibly, a lot more dangerous. The Wanderlust hummed with life as it hurtled through the vast expanse of space. Jax, a man more comfortable with the company of stars than people, found himself oddly drawn to Lyra's quiet presence. She was an enigma, wrapped in layers of secrets and guarded emotions. She spent most of her time in the ship's cramped galley, staring out at the swirling nebulae, lost in thought. Occasionally, she would help Jax with routine maintenance, her nimble fingers surprisingly adept at repairing the Wanderlust's aging systems. He learned little about her past. She spoke in fragments, offering glimpses of a life lived on the fringes of society, a life marked by hardship and loss. He sensed a deep-seated pain behind her eyes, a shadow that clung to her like a second skin. He respected her silence, offering companionship rather than interrogation. He knew that trust, like a rare flower in the harshness of space, needed time and patience to bloom. One evening, as they were sharing a meal of protein rations and rehydrated fruit, Jax decided to break the silence. "Lyra," he began, "that tattoo on your wrist. I think I've seen it before." Lyra's hand instinctively moved to cover the tattoo. A flicker of fear crossed her face, quickly replaced by a mask of indifference. "It's nothing," she said, her voice flat. "Just a silly childhood memory." Jax knew she was lying. He'd seen that symbol before, years ago, on a wanted poster in a seedy spaceport cantina. The details were hazy, but he remembered the reward. A staggering sum for the capture of a woman accused of espionage and treason. He studied Lyra, her guarded expression, the way she avoided his gaze. Could this quiet, enigmatic woman be the dangerous fugitive the authorities were after? He decided to probe further. "Lyra," he said gently, "I am not trying to pry. But sometimes, sharing our burdens can make them easier to bear." Lyra looked up at him, her eyes filled with a mixture of vulnerability and defiance. "You wouldn't understand," she whispered. "My past, it's complicated. Try me," Jax urged, his voice soft. Lyra hesitated, her fingers tracing the outline of the falcon tattoo. Then, taking a deep breath, she began to speak. She told him about a life spent running, a life lived in the shadows. She spoke of a powerful organization she had once served, an organization that had betrayed her and branded her a traitor. She spoke of a mission gone wrong, a desperate escape, and a price on her head that had forced her to disappear into the vastness of space. As she spoke, Jax felt a growing sense of unease. He realized that he had unwittingly stumbled into a dangerous game, a game with stakes far higher than he had imagined. He looked at Lyra, her face pale in the dim light of the galley, and felt a surge of protectiveness. He knew that he couldn't abandon her now, not when she needed him the most. But he also knew that he couldn't ignore the truth. He had to find out who Lyra really was and what she was running from. He had to decide whether to trust his instincts, or the whispers of doubt that were beginning to creep into his mind. Jax wrestled with his conscience. He was a man of the stars, a loner who trusted no one but himself. Yet, something about Lyra's vulnerability, her quiet strength, had touched him in a way he hadn't expected. He knew the risks of harboring a fugitive, especially one with such a hefty bounty on her head. He could lose his ship, his freedom, even his life. But he also knew that he couldn't just turn her over to the authorities. He had seen the fear in her eyes, the desperation in her voice. He had seen a glimpse of the woman beneath the layers of secrets, and he couldn't bring himself to betray her. He decided to play it carefully. He needed more information. He accessed the Wanderlust's encrypted comm system and discreetly searched for any news related to Lyra and her alleged crimes. The information he found painted a complex picture. Lyra, it seemed, was accused of stealing classified data that could destabilize entire star systems. The authorities portrayed her as a dangerous radical, a threat to galactic peace. But Jax also found whispers of a conspiracy, rumors of a powerful cabal within the government, a cabal that silenced dissent and manipulated events from the shadows. The more he dug, the more confused he became. Was Lyra a criminal, or a victim of circumstance? Was she a threat, or a scapegoat? He realized that the truth was buried beneath layers of propaganda and misinformation. He needed to hear her side of the story, the whole story. He found Lyra in the observation dome, gazing out at the swirling tapestry of stars. He sat down beside her, the silence between them heavy with unspoken questions. "Lyra," he began, his voice gentle, "I know about the bounty." Lyra flinched, her eyes filled with a mixture of fear and resignation. "I knew it was only a matter of time," she whispered. "I am not going to turn you in," Jax said, his voice firm. "But I need to know the truth. Tell me everything." Lyra hesitated, her gaze fixed on the distant stars. Then, slowly, she began to speak. She told him about her work as a data analyst for a powerful corporation, a corporation that controlled vast swaths of interstellar trade. She told him about discovering evidence of illegal weapons trafficking, evidence that implicated high-ranking officials within the government. She told him about her attempt to expose the truth, and how she was framed for treason and forced to flee for her life. As she spoke, Jax listened intently, his heart pounding in his chest. He could feel the sincerity in her voice, the desperation in her words. He realized that Lyra wasn't just a fugitive. She was a whistleblower, a woman who had risked everything to expose corruption. "They'll come after me, Jax," she said, her voice trembling. "They won't stop until they silence me. Then we'll have to be ready for them," Jax replied, his gaze meeting hers. "We'll face them together." A flicker of hope ignited in Lyra's eyes. "Together," she repeated, her voice barely a whisper. "Together," Jax confirmed. He knew that he was making a dangerous choice, a choice that could cost him everything. But he also knew that he couldn't turn his back on her now. He had given her his word, and he intended to keep it. He had trusted his instincts, and he had trusted her. Now, they would have to face the consequences together. Life on the Wanderlust took on a new urgency. Jax, a seasoned spacefarer, knew that they couldn't outrun the authorities forever. They needed a plan, a way to clear Lyra's name and expose the conspiracy that had framed her. He upgraded the ship's defenses, reinforcing the hull and installing a state-of-the-art cloaking device salvaged from a derelict military cruiser. He trained Lyra in combat tactics, teaching her how to handle a blaster and navigate the ship's weapons systems. He pushed the Wanderlust to its limits, charting a course through uncharted territories, dodging patrols and evading surveillance. Their pursuers were relentless: bounty hunters, mercenaries, and even government agents, lured by the promise of a hefty reward, joined the chase. The Wanderlust became a magnet for trouble, attracting unwanted attention wherever it went. Jax and Lyra fought off ambushes in asteroid fields, evaded capture in crowded spaceports, and outran warships in daring hyperspace jumps. They relied on each other, their skills complementing each other perfectly. Jax, with his knowledge of the stars and his mastery of the ship, navigated them through treacherous nebulae and asteroid fields. Lyra, with her sharp intellect and her knowledge of data systems, hacked into enemy networks, gathering intelligence and disabling their pursuers. Through it all, their bond deepened. They shared close quarters, their lives intertwined in a constant dance of survival. Jax, the solitary spacefarer, found himself opening up to Lyra, sharing his fears and his dreams. Lyra, the guarded fugitive, found solace in Jax's strength and his unwavering loyalty. They found comfort in each other's company, their shared experiences forging a connection that transcended the dangers they faced. One evening, as they were enjoying a rare moment of respite, Lyra turned to Jax, her eyes filled with gratitude. "Thank you, Jax," she said, her voice soft. "For everything." Jax looked at her, his heart swelling with emotion. "You don't have to thank me, Lyra," he replied. "I am just doing what's right." "It's more than that," Lyra insisted. "You've saved my life. You've given me hope." Jax reached out and took her hand, his fingers intertwining with hers. "We'll get through this, Lyra," he said, his voice filled with conviction. "I promise you." Their moment of peace was shattered by the piercing shriek of the Wanderlust's alarm system. Jax raced to the bridge, his heart pounding in his chest. The sensors were ablaze with warnings. A fleet of warships had emerged from hyperspace, their weapons locked onto the Wanderlust. They were surrounded. "It's a trap," Lyra exclaimed, her voice filled with alarm. Jax gritted his teeth. They had been lured into an ambush, a carefully orchestrated plan to capture them. He knew that they were outnumbered and outgunned, but he also knew that he couldn't give up, not now. He had to protect Lyra, no matter the cost. "Hold on tight," he said, his voice grim. "This is going to be a bumpy ride." He engaged the Wanderlust's engines, pushing them to their maximum capacity. The ship lurched forward, narrowly avoiding a barrage of laser fire. Jax weaved through the enemy fleet, his hands dancing across the control panel. Explosions rocked the ship, the lights flickering ominously. But Jax held his course, his determination fueled by his love for Lyra. He knew that they couldn't outrun their pursuers forever. They needed a miracle. The Wanderlust was a wounded bird, its shields failing, its hull breached in multiple places. Jax fought with the desperation of a cornered animal, his every maneuver a gamble against overwhelming odds. Lyra, her face pale but resolute, manned the weapon systems, her shots finding their marks with deadly accuracy. But it was a losing battle. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and running out of time. Just as Jax was about to make a desperate gamble, a voice crackled over the comms system. It was a familiar voice, a voice he hadn't heard in years. "Nova, is that you, old friend?" Jax's heart leapt with hope. It was Captain Valerius, a legendary smuggler and a thorn in the side of the authorities. He had a reputation for daring exploits and a knack for showing up at the most opportune moments. "Valerius, what are you doing here?" Jax exclaimed, his voice filled with disbelief. "Heard you were in a bit of a bind," Valerius chuckled. "Figured I'd lend a hand." Suddenly, a squadron of sleek, heavily armed ships materialized out of the darkness, their weapons blazing. They were Valerius's private fleet, a force to be reckoned with. The tide of the battle turned in an instant. The enemy warships, caught off guard, were quickly overwhelmed. Explosions lit up the void as Valerius's ships tore through their ranks. Jax, seizing the opportunity, punched the Wanderlust through a gap in the enemy lines, escaping into the safety of hyperspace. As they jumped to safety, Lyra turned to Jax, her eyes shining with gratitude. "Valerius, he's a friend of yours?" she asked. Jax nodded, a smile spreading across his face. "An old friend," he confirmed. "And a very resourceful one." They emerged from hyperspace in a remote sector, far from the reach of their pursuers. Valerius's fleet had escorted them to a hidden base, a haven for those who sought refuge from the law. There, amidst the camaraderie of fellow rogues and rebels, Jax and Lyra found a temporary sanctuary. But their fight was far from over. They knew that the authorities would not rest until they were captured. They needed a way to clear Lyra's name, a way to expose the truth and bring down the corrupt officials who had framed her. Valerius, ever the opportunist, had a plan. He had connections, information that could expose the conspiracy and shake the foundations of the government. He proposed a daring operation, a strike at the heart of the enemy, a chance to not only clear Lyra's name but to bring justice to those who had abused their power. Jax and Lyra, their bond forged in the fires of adversity, their love for each other a beacon of hope in the darkness, agreed to join Valerius's crusade. They knew that the risks were high, but they also knew that they couldn't stand idly by while injustice prevailed. They set off on a new adventure, a mission that would take them to the very edge of the galaxy, a mission that would test their courage, their loyalty, and their love for each other. They were no longer just fugitives on the run. They were freedom fighters, champions of truth, and guardians of hope. And they would not rest until they had won. The hidden base on the desolate moon of Kale was a hive of activity. Valerius, a man of flamboyant gestures and even more flamboyant attire, paced before a holographic display, outlining their plan. Jax and Lyra, still bearing the marks of their narrow escape, listened intently. The data chip Lyra possessed was their key, but retrieving it from its hidden location, a heavily fortified Crimson Hand stronghold on the planet Cygnus, was a suicide mission. "Cygnus is a fortress," Valerius explained, his voice booming. "Impenetrable shields, legions of guards, and crawling with surveillance drones. We need a way in, and a way out, without getting vaporized." Lyra, her mind already working, stepped forward. "I know the layout of the base," she said, her voice steady. I designed some of the security systems myself. Jax raised an eyebrow. You designed their security? I had to, Lyra replied, a hint of bitterness in her voice. It was part of my job. Valerius grinned. Excellent. A Trojan horse, even better. But we still need a way past those shields. Jax, recalling a risky maneuver he once pulled off, had an idea. We could try a cloaked approach, using a modified freighter with a stolen Crimson Hand transponder code. We'll need to slip through their outer perimeter pretending to be a supply run. The plan was audacious, bordering on insane, but it was their only chance. They spent the next few days preparing, modifying a captured freighter, the Serpent's Kiss, and gathering intel on the Cygnus base's routines. Lyra, despite her past association with the Crimson Hand, proved invaluable, her knowledge of their systems giving them a crucial edge. Jax, observing her, saw not the traitor the authorities painted her as, but a woman driven by a desire to atone for her past. Their bond, forged in danger and mutual trust, deepened with each passing hour. The Serpent's Kiss, cloaked and bearing false credentials, approached Cygnus. Jax, at the helm, felt the familiar tension of a high-stakes operation. Lyra, beside him, monitored the ship's systems, her fingers flying across the console as she fed the stolen transponder code to the Crimson Hand's network. Shields down, she announced, her voice tight. In. They slipped past the outer perimeter, the Serpent's Kiss blending seamlessly with the base's regular traffic. Inside, the base was a maze of corridors and heavily guarded checkpoints. Lyra, guiding them through the labyrinth, led them to a restricted section, the location of the data vault where the secure chip was hidden. The vault is protected by a biometric scanner, Lyra explained. It requires a retinal scan and a voice print. Whose? Jax asked. Mine, Lyra replied grimly. Or rather, it was. They reached the vault, a massive steel door guarded by two heavily armed Crimson Hand soldiers. Lyra stepped forward, her heart pounding in her chest. She knew this was the most dangerous part of the mission. I'll handle this, she said, taking a deep breath. She approached the scanner, placing her eye against the lens. The system recognized her retinal pattern. Then, she spoke a command phrase, her voice echoing through the vault. The door hissed open. Inside, the vault was a cold, sterile room. Rows of data servers lined the walls. Lyra quickly located the secure chip, hidden in a small, unmarked box. As she reached for it, an alarm blared through the base. They had been discovered. They know we here. Jax shouted. Let's go. Crimson Hand guards swarmed the vault, their blasters trained on Jax and Lyra. A fierce firefight erupted. Jax, his pulse rifle spitting fire, covered Lyra as she retrieved the data chip. They fought their way back through the corridors, dodging laser fire and disabling security drones. The Serpent's Kiss is this way, Lyra yelled, leading Jax towards their escape route. They reached the hangar bay, where the Serpent's Kiss waited. But their path was blocked by a squadron of Crimson Hand fighters. Valerius' voice crackled over the comm system. Nova, get out of there. Creating a diversion. Valerius' fleet attacked the Crimson Hand base, drawing their attention away from Jax and Lyra. The Serpent's Kiss launched, narrowly avoiding a barrage of laser fire. Jax piloted the freighter through the chaos, escaping Cygnus just as the base's defenses came online. They jumped to hyperspace, leaving the Crimson Hand base behind. On board the Serpent's Kiss, Lyra finally had the data chip in her hands. It contained the evidence they needed to expose the Crimson Hand's conspiracy. But they knew their fight was far from over. The Crimson Hand would not rest until they were silenced. They were now fugitives again, but this time, they had the means to fight back. Their journey had just begun.